Hello, everybody. I am Mike Westendorf, and welcome to Great Questions, Great Conversations, a podcast out of St. Paul's, Muskego and the Bridge in Muskego, Wisconsin, in which we talk about questions that come up, and they oftentimes lead to some fantastic conversations. And we just want to invite you to be a part of this. You can certainly leave comments in the YouTube or Spotify, wherever that you might be listening in from. Shoot us off an email. We would love to hear from you. Joined with me today is Arica Drezdzon and Paul Schuessler, who joined me last week as well. And we are talking about a topic on leadership. So first of all, good morning to the two of you.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning. How you doing, Mike?
Right on time, man. I'm doing well. Great to have you guys here. And for all of our listeners, where are we going? Well, this is kind of Lessons in Leadership, part 2. And to give a little bit of biblical framework, there's 2 Bible passages I'm putting on it. Why are you listening to this? Why should you spend the next half hour, 45 minutes with us? It's up to you. But we are big believers in growing in our ability to influence people, lead people well, from a Christian standpoint. So the Bible is our foundation. And out of that, we are kind of talking about some leadership points that were shared with us through a blog post by a guy named Kerry Newhoff, who does a lot of leadership podcasts on his own. Very, very effective in bringing leadership principles to life. And so we're going to be talking about 6 of the 25 today. But to get us started, Paul and Arica, I'm going to jump into 2 places that kind of set a little bit of a high bar. Want us to think about it this way. Leadership is influence. That's what leadership is. Leadership is influence, and all of us have influence. All of us have seasons in life and positions in life, friends groups, family, work, in which we lead and in which we follow. And 2 Bible passages that came to mind as we say, why should I strive to lead better? Especially if you're somebody who doesn't see yourself as a leader. Why should I? James chapter 3, verse 1, the Bible says we need to think about leadership with some seriousness. He says this, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Which is like, well, I'm not going to be a teacher in a school and I'm not going to be a teacher in a church. But if you're a parent, you're a teacher at home. And there's a day coming where you may be teaching in other spaces and training in other spaces. So a serious note there. And then Paul also then will say something like this in 1 Timothy, in which he's helping Timothy learn how to be a good leader in the church. But I think that, again, this applies to leaders, Christian leaders, period. He says this, be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. So Arica and Paul, before we jump into the leadership, nuggets, when you hear those 2 passages, how do they make you feel? What comes to mind? Do you push back? Do you run away? Do you embrace it? Why are these passages, and from a leadership standpoint, do you think important?
The first thing that comes to mind is, maybe I should be doing more. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Thinking about leadership specifically, it really makes you think about, am I following his way? Am I doing what his word says to the absolute best of my ability? And that really calls then for some self-reflection and some looking inward. And I think, of course, we can always be better. Every single one of us, we can always be better. But I think these passages specifically, they kind of raise the question, am I teaching in a space where I could be teaching, and either I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't feel like I have the time, or whatever it may be. We can always be doing more.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking, was I even aware that this is the bar? Like, I know for me
Mm-hmm.
as a parent, I was not thinking about the reality that I'm a teacher at home. I mean, I knew that, but I wasn't thinking about it seriously. And even take it one step further, I am the pastor of my family church when my children are young, especially, and my wife and I together are the shepherds of that family. And their experience with what it means to be part of the body of Christ is actually being grown in my own family. Ooh, then you come across Paul saying, "Be diligent in these matters. Watch your life and your doctrine closely." Oh my goodness. I might need some help, which is why we're talking about this. Paul, did you have any response to these two passages as we begin?
Yeah, thanks for opening it up with scripture, Mike. Eric, I agree wholeheartedly. Sometimes the response to a scripture passage that kind of says many of you should not teach, everybody kind of recoils in fear and says, okay, I'm going
Okay,
in
no, I'm
another
not going to do it.
direction. But
Right.
the reality is I think what James is getting at is, and being a teacher for a long time, you learn more with time and experience how important it is to really take seriously what you're doing. You can't just go into it not really considering the weight of whatever you're presenting to people and the way you present it to, whether you're a formal teacher or a pastor or a leader of a company or a leader of a group of some sort, whatever your realm is, that that you've always got the opportunity to lead people in a positive way, right? To encourage, support, to build, or you've got the opportunity to do the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you bring in kind of the the ugliness of our sinful life, right? And that's what gets seen, and that can be a scary look, when it's like, do as I say. I'm pointing the finger at myself as a dad right now, right? Do as I say, and don't do as I do right now, as I'm getting frustrated and showing you what really I don't want you to be doing. I
Mm-hmm.
want to encourage you in a better way, but the way I'm going about it is not very good. And I think it takes time to work through that, but it really relates back to some of the topics that we chose to talk about last week, which are, boy, it really matters that you put yourself in a sphere of people who are going to encourage you to walk this way and to live this way and behave this way. And I think Paul was doing that to Timothy, where he's like, hey, I'm here, I'm your mentor, follow my example. Surround yourself with people who are going to lift you up, build you up, and encourage you in the direction that you've been sent on, right? To know what's true and pure. And so that's where I say it's just a strong caution that we've got to take seriously. Like, know what you look like,
Mm-hmm.
know where your heart is, know what your goal is, so that you can lead people in a way that is a blessing to them, whether it's your family or wherever you might be. So
Paul,
that's a huge one for me.
yeah, let's start with you, because we were talking off air. Just, we're going to do two apiece. Our last podcast, it was 50 minutes. We had a chance to be able to talk about this stuff. I mean, it's amazing how short the time can go as you start talking about these topics. But let's get you started. I think you're number 20. Again, this is off of a blog that's in the show notes. And you can click on that, and you can see what we're reading or what we're going off of. But you selected number 20, and I think that's a really good place for us to start with that. So why don't you read that and get us started on that leadership?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So number 20 is, and I maybe I'd substitute a bigger number in there. It says, work twice as hard on your character as you do on your competency. And that struck a bell with me because I think as Christians, in the back of your mind, you've always got the fruits of the spirit and the encouragement of scripture to be a representative of Christ. But sometimes what that looks like in the world, or training in that or developing in that, is not very clear
Hmm.
or obvious. And however, through school, through college, in the workplace, the competency, the expertise in some skill is highly emphasized, right? That's the
Yeah,
outcome.
very much so.
You know, but in reality, really what most people want all the time is not a highly skilled individual. It's a highly dependable individual, really, which has nothing to do with the skill. The skill is going to be a blessing, but it's who you are, the fact that you are trustworthy, you have integrity, you're going to represent the company, you're going to take care of the job that you're asked to do, you're going to speak in a way that builds people up, and so that one stood out to me. And being a parent too, like you see the heart of your children, and then you start to you have to deal with this, like who are you, who am I raising you to be, when you go out into the world, what are they going to see, so it's a fear factor, right?
A
But
little.
it's also I want you to be, I want you to be a blessing to everybody that you bump into out in the world, right? Whoever's in your circle of influence, I want them to see a heart that, loves people, cares for people, takes care of people, and an
So,
energy that's about that too.
so Arica, you know, I'm curious to get your take on that. And you're now heading into your later 20s. Was this as you came through schooling and things of that nature? How much did this get talked about? How do you relate to this particular nugget?
I'm really glad. Yeah, I'm really glad that Paul brought up the aspect of training and education and schooling at a young age, and how, coming out of college a few years ago, um, there were no classes on how to be a better person. And it's interesting, right? It's interesting to think about what the world would be like if we took classes and we were trained on how to be good people, kind people. Um, and I will always tell people this. Sometimes it's really hard, um, as I'm paying off student loans and everything, to be like, what is this piece of paper for? Um, but there was one class I took in my 4 years of college. I don't remember barely anything else. I don't remember the lectures, but there was one class that I took in college, and it was on forgiveness.
Oh, really?
I think it was actually called It was called Forgiveness 101.
Wow.
Um, and it was the only class in my 4 years that I actually took something with me. And it's interesting to think about a world. What would the world be like if there was more of that? If there was more training on, forgiving people, forgiving yourself. Um, and, and then when you think about, especially coming out of the secular world, the jobs that I had previous to, working in ministry at St. Paul's, that wasn't part of the interview process of, well, how faithful are you, how kind are you, and it's just so different. But those things are important in the workplace, at home. Those things are important. You can be as successful as you can be, but if you are treating your cohorts or your employees as less than, how far is that really going to get you in life, really?
Right. He said, is just a couple of additional context sentences. Competency is not the main key to success. Character is. Your competency will take you only as far as your character can sustain you. I just thought that was like there's your tweetable moment, if you will. That rang true to me as I was reading through that. And you have to work, Paul, maybe just speak into this, but because we talk about this all the time back and forth in our offices, it requires work to work on your character. Why are we so averse to working hard on our character?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So sometimes I just revert back to, well, you only know what you know, right? You if you don't know what's important to work on, or you're not in an environment that is challenging you to work on it, well, you don't need to, right?
Which is, by the way, why
so
we thought this topic was important to talk about. Is we want to bring this up because we think that leading is something that most of us actually do, and that we don't talk about it. And if you don't know about it, you can't get called to a higher level of it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you look at, well, let's just lay it out as clearly as we can. Like, you look at any, social media site, or you look at, TV today, and oftentimes you kind of your stomach turns a little bit because of the example that's being portrayed. But, it's like, in the face of something that's not very good, or you're challenged with, right? That's where the character aspect of, well, okay, what do we do about it then? Or who are we going to be in the face of this mess, right? And that's where, there's hope, real hope in the Bible, that, well, okay, we're going to turn from the mess to the solution to the mess, which is really only to God, and in prayer, and to other wise Christians that you know, who are going to guide you and provide wisdom for you, and
So you're kind of
the,
on the idea of community, right?
well,
I want to keep the
we're dead without it, right?
What's that?
I said we're dead without it. Toast.
Right. We're toast without
Yeah.
it. Hey, Arica, you're a you've been doing the training, the physical training and stuff like that. I mean, that's hard work. In your opinion, what does hard work on your character look like?
Like, what does it take?
Yeah, what I mean, like if we say, I want to get better, more physically fit. I know what I can go do. If I want to get better at I'm gonna work with golf, and I'm gonna go with Paul, who's gonna tell me all the things that I'm doing wrong. But character, how do you start on it?
It's the dedication. And I think we touched on this last week, but holding yourself accountable to something. If I truly, in my heart of hearts, I have pure intentions, and I want to be a better sister or a better friend to this one person, I have to hold myself accountable. I can't just kind of glide through those relationships or glide through these challenges in life. I really need to actively take a step back, think about it. Okay, then we can act and move forward. And then it's checking in with yourself, being like, okay, was that the right thing? Was that the wrong thing? What could have been better? I think the holding yourself accountable when it comes to your character and the person that you want to be, and the type of Christian you want to be, that's key at the end of the day.
I think I'm going to jump and piggyback off on that. I'm going to go to my next nugget that Carrie wrote that I thought was really an important one, and that's number 10 for those of you who are following on that blog post. But it's this: relentlessly pursue self-awareness. Relentlessly pursue self-awareness is one of the leadership nuggets. Self-aware people make the best leaders, and frankly are the easiest people to hang out with in life. Chances are your favorite people are people who are deeply self-aware, but it doesn't come naturally. Over the last 10 years or so, I've spent a fair amount of time with the whole strengths finder, and some of the personality typing stuff. The Enneagram has been one that I've been doing a lot of research on as well. And man, that has been helpful. The whole purpose was to try to understand my blind spots better. But then when I was leading in the secular world, I was finding that it was hard for me sometimes to mentor some of my staff or understand my bosses, quite frankly, until we started becoming more intentional about the strengths piece of things, because we all have blind spots. I can't see them, but you can. But if I could be more aware of them, and aware of how my healthy mental state or my unhealthy mental state impacts other people around me, I could be a lot more proactive about getting healthy when I'm not, and understanding how I need to get that help and what that help would actually look like. By the way, strengths, this idea that just when I use my strengths for other people, you will experience me in the best possible way. And I love how biblical that is. Be humble, value people above yourself, use your gifts, 1 Peter 4:7-11, use your gifts for one another. And he talks about hospitality and prayer and things of that nature. And I love that that's when it is. But when I am not healthy, when I am self-centered or fearful, you will typically experience me in a much less positive light as I become more direct, more easily frustrated, more blunt, not caring about my comments as much. And you guys can know that I'm stuck someplace, but I can't see it. And so this idea of relentlessly pursuing self-awareness, I think, ties very nicely into 20. What does it take to work on your character? You better start getting to know yourself. And there are tools that are out there to do that. Either of you care to comment on number 10?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in, Eric, if that's okay. I love towards the end, he says, our natural inclination is that we're blind to the impact that we have on other people, right?
Yeah.
Because and this goes to the pride factor again, me first, you last. And God says, nope, we're gonna the way that I created you is different. That person first, right? And then you last. And of course, that's with him being ultimately the first one that is teaching us that we humble ourselves. As you were talking, Mike, the the example that stood out to me is Matthew 7:3. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own, right?
I love that one.
It's like, oh yeah, well, okay. First, I technically I can't even see clearly, is what it's saying. And so yeah. But what's funny is, you know, uh, the gospel, Matthew immediately follows that up with something that I think is one of the foundational aspects of being a Christian that really everybody neglects too often. He says, so don't judge other people, right? To first take a look at yourself and how are you doing, right? Because you're ultimately responsible for yourself. You're not responsible for other people. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You can influence other people, right? But you can't do that until you take responsibility for yourself and how you're acting to influence. But he immediately follows that section up, right? Pull the log out of your eye, or get a friend to help pull the log out of your eye. And he says, turn to prayer, right? Here's something you can do to get more self-awareness. Keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find, because eventually you're going to run into God, and God is going to be the answer to everything that you need. And I just love the here's the situation, but here's the solution, right? So, like Arica said, what do we do to train? What is the hard work of training? I think that's part of it, is just growing in prayer, growing in our knowledge of who God wants us to be, right? Who did you call us to be? What does that actually look like, right? And so that's an effective piece that jumped out to me.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Arica?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it's just to touch on it at the end there, because Paul really summed it up nicely. But it is a practice. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's okay not to put that expectation on yourself. It takes time, and a lot of this too is unlearning things. If you grew up a certain way or around certain people, or you were raised a certain way that wasn't in a positive light, that's going to be hard as a preteen, teenager into young adulthood, to have all these great life lessons if you've never learned them. So being patient with people, if there are things that you just don't know yet in life, giving yourself the time and patience to unlearn some things. And it is a practice. It's a daily practice. It's dedication. You have to be motivated to find that self-awareness. All of those things, they go hand in hand, but just it's like, just keep at it.
I appreciate that you went there. That again, it is a process, and so much of this is not, like you said. In the educational system, it is basically learn something, test on something to prove competency, and yet how much of that still we have to experience through failure and failing forward, and then we find out 10, 15 years later, it's like, man, I really wish that I'd known this. We're as a team, we're all reading this book called Boundaries. And I mean, I think all of us have gone, man, it makes sense. B, it's biblical, but holy cow, if I could have had this information, I mean, there's information here about, the rethinking what's happening with our children, literally from 0 to 6 months, 6 months to a year. I mean, what those cries and whines and temper tantrum and devilish behavior really are is part of the boundary setting process. And it's like, I missed most of those cues and I can't go back. And so part of what we're hoping is that people might learn them earlier in life and be able to apply them in a way that's successful. But be kind to yourself. And I'm glad that you mentioned that forgiveness piece too, the class on forgiveness, Arica, because you gotta go back to the cross. I mean, all of this is going to feel like law and should and shame if you don't realize that God every day is saying you're loved, you're forgiven, get up and start again. So, Arica, you're the next one up. What was one of your leadership nuggets?
Both of mine actually, I think, they go hand in hand a little bit, but we can start with number one.
Go ahead and we can do them hand in hand. It'll kind of condense our time a little bit.
Okay, perfect. We'll start with number one, then deal with your issues early. I think there's a reason this is maybe number one on the list. Because if you deal with your issues, everything else can come after. Learning some hard lessons the past few years of my life. Losing friendships, gaining friendships, going through different life transitions. One of the most important things that I've come out of all of this and that I'm still learning is that I cannot control other people. I cannot control how they act. Whether it affects me directly or indirectly, I can't control what they say. All I can do, again, going back to, I can look inward and I can look up at the cross. And I underlined here, it says in the blog post under number one, you are the common denominator in everything that's happened to you. So deal with you. And that's like, that statement, it kind of makes me laugh. It kind of makes me want to cry, because it's, when someone burns you or someone hurts you or you're going through something that you just didn't ask for, it's so easy to be like, why is this happening to me? It's everyone else's fault. I wish this wasn't the case. I wish this person was different because then I wouldn't be going through this. Well, reality check, you can't change any of that. All you can really do at the end of the day is look inward. What can Arica change? How can I talk differently? How can I act differently? I want to Google this so I don't get it wrong. I believe it was, and this kind of then goes into number 18, but I think it was an Eleanor Roosevelt quote. And she said, it's one of my favorites, and I used to have it on my mirror. It says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And when I was going through a certain time in my life, that one really helped me, because it made me, that quote, it makes you look inside, without Arica's consent. I will not, and going back to boundaries again, we can kind of tie all this in together. I won't let anyone cross that boundary. All I can do is look inward and hopefully make myself, better when I come out the other end.
Right. Which of course is a foundational piece of, when you're built on the foundation, that's where the better actually comes from, is Christ.
Yep.
Yeah. So 18,
so
what?
18, my next one, find the high road and live on it. And that's, I think that Eleanor Roosevelt quote kind of ties those in together. The high road is the hard road, but it's the best road. Take it every time. And as everyone has experienced in life, anger, hurt, pain, you want to take revenge, or you want to stick it to that other person. Looked up Luke 9:23. Then he said to the crowd, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me." And it's interesting the amount of times Jesus uses you and your. You must give up your own way, take up your cross, and then follow me. It's a lot of big ideas, but I think it's helpful. I always, at the end of the day, no matter how hurt I am, I always go back to Jesus. I really, and it sounds so corny, and it's like it needs to be on a t-shirt, but that question of what would Jesus do? Mm-hmm. You've been burned, you've been hurt, you've been in pain due to someone else's actions. Okay, Arica, what would Jesus do? I ask myself that more than once a day. Mm-hmm. Because I want to live the way that he lived. It's never going to be perfect, but if at the end of the day, if I can go to bed with my heart and soul at ease, knowing that I did the best that I could to live the way that he does and follow him through, it's going to be okay. And I think there's another part of it too that I've had to remind myself, and that was another hard lesson that I've learned these last few years, is that hurt people hurt people. And going back to, some people don't know what they don't know. Some people, and they take that and they use it against you, or they hurt you with it. What would Jesus do? What would he say? What would he think? Pray for that person. Find peace with the situation, with the turmoil, with the pain. And you will find yourself, this weight will be lifted. Yeah. When you do not use other people's actions against you, when you stop carrying them, because really there's nothing you could do about them. All you can do is look inward.
That's the idea of taking the high road. Paul, as soon as Arica said, you pick up your cross, you carry, I was just thinking, oh, I bet you Paul's ready to jump in on that one. There's some responsibility that's going on here.
Oh, you said a lot well, Arica, and thank you. There's a lot there, but the high road, and then your other one, number one. Boy,
yeah.
What was my thought? So here this, I think I'm always trying to think. Okay, so let's try and identify the obvious, right? And it's stated there, we've all got issues, right? We're sinful creatures. We're battling the sin in our flesh, and then we've got the devil attacking us and misleading us, and we've got the world's influence that is not correct, guiding us in a direction that's away from God. And so the reality is, the whole you don't know what you don't know is the solution. God's solution to that is to be in community, right? It's and right now we're experiencing that, the aftermath of COVID, and this prolonged isolation, that people are still kind of stuck in that idea of, no, we don't want to be together with people. But in reality, that's God's solution, right? Is the church, I am here, and you have support, you have encouragement, and the hope is that it's good. I know even the people in the church mess it up, because we're all sinful, but the reality is that when you do have relationships that are for your best and people are for your good, that you get to see it in action, right? You kind of know what it looks like, you get to experience it, and then from there you then get to carry it on to your next group, right? To influence them with that experience. And when that doesn't exist, right, or the experience itself, like growing up in the family, or in an environment where you're being it's not good, right? You it takes time to change that, right? To be in that good company and to have leaders who are going to encourage you. And to be honest, part of the one, sometimes the hard part of leadership is you got to have that honest conversation, right? Like, I love you enough to tell you that, boy, I'm going to help you pull that log out of you because it's blocking what you're supposed to be doing, or it's hindering you.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, there are a couple passages, but this last one, take the high road. This is an old quote too, Charles Swindoll's attitude quote. Have you guys ever heard that one before?
I don't think I have.
My dad gave it to me early, so it's always been up in the house at some point. But here's what he said. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude is more important than facts. It's more important than all this stuff. We cannot change the inevitable, all the stuff that's going to happen to us, right? You can't, as much as you want to, you can't change that. The only thing we can do is play the one string we have. And you said this, Arica, right? And that is our attitude, right? Mm-hmm. I am convinced that life is, he says, 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And I would actually use a different term rather than react, which is kind of this, this immediate, almost natural, which sometimes isn't the best. It would be take a step back and then respond to life, where you think through what's going on and you apply God's truth as a weapon against the attack or whatever's happening out there, and when you look at it like that, it kind of simplifies things quite a bit, right? All that out there, I don't have to worry about,
right?
It's just this mess right here that
yep
I've got to
respond, Arica.
Yep. Yeah, well, just that idea of the world is on his shoulders. Pastor, so I can take it off of mine. Pastor Pete shared that with me last fall when I was going through a life transition. He shared that with me, and it was one of those light bulb moments. It was like, God's got this. I do not have to put all this pressure on myself and the pain in the world and how other people have hurt me and how I have hurt other people and how awful it is. He has it. And that was truly life-changing for me to remind yourself that take the pressure off. He has it, but still look to him, of course.
We're talking in our ministry team as we get ready for a sermon coming up that Moses is in the wilderness with all the people, and they're complaining to him about, we don't have any meat to eat. We really want meat to eat, and we don't have any. And it's just fascinating to me that he takes on the burden of feeding all the people instead of going to God. So he goes to God with his own complaint. Hey, they're all asking me for food, and if this is the way that you're going to deal with me and put me in this, just put me out of my misery. And it's just, when we're going through that, it's just funny to me how quickly we will put the responsibility of whatever the outcome is on our own shoulders. For Paul and I as parents, we're wrestling with some of our stuff, and as we're dealing with our kids and helping them grow and mature, and I feel very responsible for the outcome. And thank you, Arica, for the reminder. It's like, no, I mean, that's not your responsibility how they turn out, because they're a part of that too, the whole you idea. How can I use the leadership that I have? Well, when somebody comes at me, take the high road, look in the mirror first, all of those kinds of things. This is really good. Two more quick ones because we're running short on time. So Paul, you've got one more, I've got one more. What was your other nugget, leadership nugget for us to consider?
Well, self-confession. This is one that I kick myself for not being over and over, which is why God blessed me with marrying a woman who is this. Right, and it's the last one, 25.
25.
Be bold. I am not. Sometimes I can fake it, like I pretend like I'm bold. Um, but in reality, like boldness that's a character trait that everybody looks up to, right? Somebody who appears to have no fear is willing to step out and take chances. And I'm just kind of a big fat coward, to be honest with you. I can talk a big talk, but when it comes to actually putting one foot in front of the other, boy, I fall down and start crying really quickly. And I want the reason it stands out so much is that I think it has to do with you know the leadership piece. Yes, it's important as a leader to be bold, because ultimately you're the one who has to make the tough decisions, to turn or to pivot or to continue right in the direction you're going. um, you have to be bold to have strong conversations when they need to be had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think about just a willingness to step out, right? Peter comes to mind in the boat, right? There's a big storm and the apostles are all freaking out, and here comes Jesus walking across the lake in the middle of the storm, and he's like, "Hey, come here." And Peter's like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And he steps out, right? And I would have been the guy who's like, "You're lying, there's no way I'm going out there." But then he takes a couple of steps and he takes his eyes off Jesus, right? Which is always the case when you're asked to step out, because his plan is always something way different than what we think is best, right? There's this there's this secret little door, there's this push, this nudge, this pull, and he's like, "Oh no, over there, over there." And you're like, "Yeah, right, that's crazy, not over there, that doesn't make any sense, right? This is safe, it makes sense, it's logical, right? This is what I've been thinking and leading up to." And so my whole life it's been one of those of you kind of just let opportunities pass by because you're unwilling to step out in
He,
that
he said
faithful
in
direction.
his extra quotes, be bolder than you think you should be. Too many dreams die of timidity. And I appreciate his bonus. Don't let fear win. Yep, you're afraid. Go for it anyway. And Paul, I'm glad you brought in the idea of the conversation, because I think that's probably the biggest place where we freak out and we don't do it. How many conversations that we know that we need to have do we not have, either because we don't think we can control ourselves, or we think it'll get better, so I just assume, and so we don't have them. But that boldness in particularly our conversation, I think that's kind of a critical piece. Arica, did you have a thought on this?
I think I would ask our audience and you guys to ask yourself this question. When you look back on your life and what you have experienced, the opportunities that you've taken, ask yourself, if I was too afraid to take that, where would I be now? I think all the time about when I first reached out to Sally Wallner here about getting a job. I really wanted to get out of my previous job. It was an extremely toxic work environment. But, being new to the church and just becoming a member, and, I was like, there's no way they're going to have full-time position for me in my exact career field. With the pay I'm looking for to be able to sustain my life. Like, there's just no way. And I was terrified. I was terrified to reach out to Sally, because I was like, is she going to think like, oh my gosh, who's this new girl coming into the church asking for a job? But I had to do it. I took the leap of faith. I was terrified. I was like, I don't know what she's going to say. I was scared of being rejected. And look where we are now. St. Paul's at that exact time was looking for someone full-time with my background. And that was all a part of God's plan. And I think to myself all the time, if I was not bold enough to reach out to Sally after being a part of this church for 1 week and asking for a job, where would I be today? I'll tell you, I would probably be in a place where I wouldn't want to be, because I'm not working here. And it's, ask yourself that question when it comes to certain parts of your life. It's really interesting what you'll find the answer to be.
It's interesting in the Chronicles of Narnia. That's a good exercise. It's also one that I would say comes with a caution.
Mm-hmm.
Aslan will make the comment, because the children will have, Lucy in particular, I think it's the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, realizes that because of her action, a negative thing will happen. And she says, do you mean to say if I hadn't done this thing, it wouldn't be this way? This would have been the outcome? And Aslan says, one can never know what would have been. Well, you can know what will be. And I think that's really, God doesn't think along those lines. And so, yeah, I think that there's some value in reflecting on the man. Boldness was a really important part of my story, and the what if,
right?
And they can be helpful. Just be careful with it, right?
Right. It can be dangerous, and I think I then want to reiterate now, Mike, that I think it's more of the reflection piece where I can sit back at peace and be so grateful and thankful that I was bold enough to take that step. Not so much looking back and kind of wondering what would have been, because this was always the plan, right? But taking that time to be so grateful for what God has given you and the blessing that for me this job has brought me, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's good.
Just one more thought, Mike, before I cut you off, and as you're leading into your last one, kind of what I love about all of these is you kind of find as you go through it, and as we're discussing this, I'm noticing how each one is intertwined, right? You try and pull one out. You can a little bit, right? It's got a specific nuance to it, but in reality, they're all wrapped up, right? So, if I look at the be bold consideration, right? His final hurrah, be bold, right? Don't let fear get in the way, right? Of a step forward into something great. It's when I look at the hesitation of myself, right? It's just inward. What's going to happen to me if I do this? My eyes are no longer on God. Where if we go back to with some of the earlier ones we talked about, right? Live like God loves you, and everything you read in the Bible is true.
Right.
I think the fear would be dissipated pretty quick. Like, you ask him the question, then you're willing to ask other people the question, is this a good choice? And then step out in peace.
Yeah.
To do brave and bold things, So just go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good
last one, my friend.
Yeah, seasoning the whole thing is seasoned with the idea of being bold. Because mine is number 6. I thought this was an interesting one that, from a leadership standpoint, you probably don't think much about, particularly if we're a little bit younger. But this idea of be generous when you have no money. Be generous when you have no money. The older I get, the more I realize that generosity is the antidote to so much self-centeredness. When I'm willing to be generous with my comments, with my attitude toward other drivers on the roadway, the decision to be generous toward my employer or my clients, within boundaries, I need to be able to have my priorities set straight. But boy, the concept of generosity, and not because, well, God did it for me, so I guess I got to do it for everybody else. That's not the posture of the gospel and the heart of God. But He's so loved us, He's generous, not only to give us salvation, but to everything that we need. What happens when I apply that same mindset? And this is for those of you who might be listening in your teens, in your early 20s. I work with a lot of college students, and what I'll hear from everybody: I have no time and I have no money. And we also know that's not true. As older people, we'll all say the same thing: I have no time and I have no money. There's never going to ever be enough for what the human heart sinfully desires. However, if you learn the skill of practicing generosity, when you have, in your opinion, nothing, you learn to be generous with what you have. that changes hearts. I heard it said that, you can't be anxious and thankful at the same time. And so if you're struggling with anxiety, one of the best ways to be able to do that is be thankful. And part of your expression of thankfulness is to be generous with people. And so I really appreciated that one as a seasoning of leadership. Maybe it's kind of an obtuse, you wouldn't necessarily guess generosity this way. It's a really important leadership principle, but I thought that was one worth mentioning.
I was watching a video of a girl I follow online, talks a lot about her faith, and she's making a 30-second video, and she's like, I may have $75 in my checking account, but guess what? I was able to pay my rent, I was able to buy my groceries, and I was able to feed my dog this week. And it really, I think half of her was being funny, half of her was being serious. But she was like, I was blessed. God blessed me. God gave me what I needed to get through this week to live my life. And it really put it in perspective for me. I think it's easy for us to be like, that idea of we don't have enough. Yeah. And in some ways, I think you'll always feel like you said, Mike, there'll never be enough time. There'll never be enough resources. Take what you have now while you have it. And something that always stuck with me that my Nana has said is, she's like, the money's not going with me when I die. So she's made an active effort her whole life to be so generous with her time and her money for her children and her grandchildren. And it's made an impact on the legacy that she is going to leave behind. Not just the financial, but the emotional legacy that she's leaving behind, because the woman was so generous throughout her life. Because at the end of the day, she was like, all I'm taking with me to heaven are my memories of you guys. And I kind of grew up hearing that all the time, and that was really instilled in us.
That's good. Well, this has been a good conversation. I appreciate you guys taking some time to chat with me and give your thoughts and do this little exercise. We've been talking about doing it for a little while in this format, where we're taking something that was written and using it as a topic. And the question really is, if leadership is influence and I have influence, and how can I lead better? And so this is Lessons on Leading Better, part 2. This is part of Carrie Newhoff's blog. It's in the show notes that you guys can read on your own as well, and maybe have some of these conversations or share with coworkers or family members, or just download and take a look at it and reflect on it for yourself. There's another list that's sitting on my wall called Lessons for Longevity, and maybe one of these days we can tackle that one too. But for now, we are at our time, and I just want to thank Arica. Thank you, Paul, for being with us.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. No,
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, that felt so forced. Like, all right, let me put up the cue card. I'm just kidding.
Mike, we really appreciate you having us on. Job well done.
Oh, thank you.
You've been a great leader by example for us.
Now we're over the top.
Yep, and pulling us out of our comfort zone. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. We're just going to keep doing more and more of these. So for all of you who are listening, thanks for joining us with this great question, great conversation. We hope that it has been helpful. You can find out more information at St. Paul Muskego, STPAUL Muskego.org, and you can learn more about the ministries that we have here. But until next week, I'm Mike Westendorf. Thanks for listening to Great Questions and Great Conversations.